This is Gemara and Beitzah Daf Yomi. The learning for this week has been generously sponsored as a schos ili nishama for Zahava Bas David Halevi, whose yahrzeit was last week on the 7th of Tishrei. The learning of the entire Chabura should be a tremendous schos ili nishmasa. Her neshama should be oila legan eden shel ma'ila. As well as the learning for this month has been sponsored as a schos for Shleima ben Yuta Mir Hashem. You should have a continuing recovery. The rest of our chelim as well. Shlomi Yosef ben Hani Afraid Amin Vega Chaim Yitzchak Shem Sivan Yisrael Zor Basinad Yisrael Basim Tzchayisay Yisrael Mendel Yisrael Shalei Shamas Namim Shafiku Shulchan Shmom Din Din Chaim Yisrael Melchaim Basim Lebracha So Musa Dinim Shen Megasim Hedi Yisrael Nechazay Yisrael Rav Kova Sheva Naftali Tzim Melchlas Yisrael Shaychol Yisrael as well as Choshedach for Yisrael Chaim and Devayer and Shir Miriam Bas Rezel Gittel. We're holding on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amid Beis, the Mishnah, continuing the theme that we've been discussing: Yontif before Shabbos, Shabbos for Yontif. Now we have Yontif after Shabbos. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amid Beis, Chal Yois Achar Shabbos. If Yontif falls out after Shabbos, Beishami Eimrim says Beishamai Mat Bilin as I call Milafnei Shabbos. You have to toivel everything before Shabbos. Beisil Eimrim Beisil argues and he says Kelim Milafnei Shabbos. Utensils have to be done before Shabbos, but Va'adam Beishabbos, when a person is allowed to toivel himself, he's allowed to go to the mikvah on Shabbos in preparation for Yontif. But Vishavin, both Beishamai and Beisil agree Shamasigin Asamayim B'Kli Evan, that you're allowed to immerse, you're allowed to make the water inside a Kli Evan that is Tameh. You're allowed to touch the water run to purify it. The way to purify it is that you're going to take this water in the Kli Evan and you're going to submerge the vessel. Basically, you're going to take the cup, you're going to put it in the mikvah. The water in the mikvah is going to go over the top, touching the water inside the vessel. The two waters touching the contiguous water is going to make it tahar. Avaloi matbilin, however, you're not allowed to be toivel it in the normal way. And the Mishnah concludes matbilin migav legav umechabur lechabura, that you're allowed to toivel from one reason to the next and from one group to another group. And we're going to see in the Gemara exactly what's going on in this Mishnah. So we have three parts of the Mishnah. We have part number one is what is the status of toiveling people / utensils on Shabbos for the Yontif after Shabbos. Machlokes Beishami Beisil. Beishami says everything before Shabbos, nothing on Shabbos. Beisil says no, utensils can't be done on Shabbos, but persons, they can toivel in the mikvah on Shabbos, even though it's a preparation for Yontif afterwards, that the Gemara will explain. And then we had an interesting din about if water in the cup is tamei, that if you toivel the water in the cup, you can do that, but not the normal way. Then we concluded about toiveling from one purpose to the next, and the Gemara will discuss a bit more. Says the Gemara, the Kuli Halma Mias, everyone seemingly agrees. Both Beishami and Beisilel, there is no disagreement. Kli B'Shabbos loy. The machlokes is the first part of the Mishnah. Beishami said you have to do Beis Hillel said one more time, you have to do. Oh, I had to write the first time. Beis Shammai said you have to do everything before Shabbos, and Beis Hillel said you have to do kelim before Shabbos. That means they're both agreeing that you're not allowed to toivel a keli, a utensil, on Shabbos for Yontif. Why not? What's the problem? Taking your cup and dipping it into the mik on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, the Kuli Alma Mias Keli b'Shabbos loy. My time, what's the reason? Amar Rabba. This is teretz number one, and we're going to have another teretz of Rav Yosef a little bit further down. Amid Aleph. Amar Rabba, answer number one. You know the reason moving over to today's Daf Yomi Amid Aleph, says Rabba, what's the Gezira? Shemi Yitzalenu B'Yanav Everna Arba Amos, which is a Rabbim. The classic Gezira, we've seen this all over Gemara and Shabbos, that what are you going to do? If you go and you take your cup, you dump it into the mik, you might not think, and you're going to go carry it, Rosh Hashanah. And of course there's no Erev, and therefore that is not allowed. So because we're afraid you can come to carry Dalet Amos, similar, Tzuk is coming up. The reason we've learned already, the reason you don't take the Lulav on day one of it Shabbos. Why? You might come to carry the lulav in Rosh Hashanah. So to over here, the reason why you cannot toivel the cup, because you might come to carry it in Rosh Hashanah. Amrlei Abayi, now a little bit of an interesting discussion now ensues. Says Abayi, Yeshla Barbe Chatira Michael Memer. That's very good if you're going to make fun of Rosh Hashanah. What if you have a bar? What if you have a mikvah in your backyard? What's the problem? If the whole concern is that you might come to carry down an Amos Rosh Hashanah, there's no concern if it's in your backyard. Amar Lei, so Rabbi responds, no question. Gezerah bar bechatira at the bar Rosh Hashanah. We make a gezerah. One gezerah because of another gezerah. Says Gemara, okay, fine. Oh, Teinach Shabbos. I understand Shabbos. Yontif, Michael and Meimar. What are you going to tell me about Yontif? Yontif when you're allowed to carry. So again, to make a gezira from your backyard because into the rest of the house, that we understand. But to make the gezira, what about Yontif? Yontif allowed to carry. Answers the Gemara. Gazu Yantiv Atu Shabbos. We make Gezerah of Yantiv Atu Shabbos. And if anyone is keeping track, that's really step number 3 of the Gezerah. Number 1 is you might carry. Number 2 is in your backyard, we make Gezerah because you might come to Taival in the street. And now number 3 is on Yantiv, we make Gezerah because you might come to carry on Shabbos. And that is the answer of Rabbah. And the basic idea that Rabbah just established is that Rabbah has no problem making Gezerah l'Gezerah. That even though you're making one decree because of another decree, Rabbah says that is not a problem. A secondary decree we will do in order to safeguard not carrying on Shabbos. And that is the reason you cannot taivel a utensil on Shabbos. So according to Rabbah, why can you not taivel the cup on Shabbos for Yontif? A localized Shabbos issue. Because you might come to carry the cup in Rosh Hashanah, Dalet Amos. What about on Yontif? We make a Gezerah Atu Shabbos. Gezerah, Gezerah, secondary decrees, secondary Gezeras, Amrinon, we do say. Now the Gemara is going to have none less than 5 different questions trying to disprove this rule, showing whether we really do make Gezerah, Gezerah when it comes to Taival, when it comes to carrying Shabbos, Yontif, etc. Says the Gemara, question number 1, Umigas, Rinon. 6 lines from the top. Now we learned in the Mishnah. Vishavin, and everyone agrees this was the second part of the Mishnah. Shamasikin is amayim b'kli evan l'taron. They're allowed to take the kliyav in the stone utensil, put it into the mikvah, make the water touch in order to make the water pure. Avaloi matbilin, but you cannot toivel. Vem isa, and for you just said Rabbah, that you make one gezerah because of another gezerah. Nigzer asaka atu atvala. So why are you allowing me to do this unique process of asaka, to have the waters touch each other, some way of purifying the water when the tummy water touches the tar water? Why are you doing that? Make a gezerah that you're not allowed to do that just because you're not allowed to do tefillah. Gezerah because of Gezerah. You can't taivel into the mikvah, so don't let me even do a sukkah into the mikvah. Says the Gemara back, the Tizra, and is that logical? Yislei mayim yafin. Tizra, and what are you going to ask? You just suggested that a shaka touching the 2 waters should be ulcer. Yislei mayim yafin. If the person has other water, clean water, hani lamali lemevilu. Hashaka. Why would he do Hashaka at all? Ella. So what must the case over here be that he's doing this process of Hashaka, that he has a cup of water which is tummy, and he's putting that water into the mikvah, so the water is touched in order to make the water tar. What must the case be? The last leg that he doesn't have any other water, and therefore became the last day miser zayir behu. Since he has nothing else, he's going to be careful. And this is going to be the basic idea of many of the answers, is that if we could show that we're dealing with a unique, interesting, and weird case, then of course gezeras are not made in such scenarios, either because it's stuff that's loy shchiach, it's not common to make gezerah, or because like we're seeing over here, it's something that you're zayir in, something that you're careful about. You're careful about cases which are unique cases, therefore we don't have to make the gezerah. And since this is a unique case, that's only reason you're doing it because you have no water, we're not worried. Question number 1, answer number 1. Esvei asks Abaye further. Says in the Beitzah, Madlin b'tzli tamei vutar. You're allowed to draw water using a tamei bucket, v'hutar, and in the process, the bucket becomes tar. V'misa, according to what you, Rabbah, just said, why are we allowing you to do pull shtick, to do this interesting case, to draw water with a tummy bucket so that it becomes tar? Make a gezerah. Should make a gezerah just like we saw before. We make gezerah like gezerah. Answers the Gemara. Because we only allow you to use your own bucket. It's a unique case. You can't just stop and draw water. You could only do it with your bucket. Zachru, again, it's a unique case and you're going to remember. Esvei, question number 3 in Rabbah. If it came to me in Erev Yantif, you're not allowed to taivel on Yantif. If it came tummy on Yantif itself, then you're allowed to be taivel on Yantif. Whoa, why are you allowed to taivel on Yantif? We just said on top of the Amid that we make a zero that you can't do it on Yantif. Make a zero just like if it becomes tummy in Erev Yantif, you cannot taivel it on Yantif. So if it becomes tummy on Yantif, you should not be able to be taivel it. Answers the Gemara. Again, it's similar to Eretz. Making something tummy and Yantif. On Yantif, everyone is tar. Everyone just went to the mikvah. Everyone's being very careful about their status of Tama. So to make something tummy and Yantif is not kamin. Again, like Azrubei Rabbanon. Esvei, question number 4. Kli shenitma ba'avat toma, ein matbino sabiyantif. A kli that became tame from an avat toma, the highest level toma. Well, not the highest level, not a via voice, but an avatam, excuse me. Ein matbino sabiyantif, you're not allowed to put it in the mikvah yantif. Bivlada toma, if it became tame with his secondary level of toma, matbino sabiyantif, then you're yes allowed to put it into the mikvah. Vimisa, based on what you just said, nigzer ha atu ha. The whole idea of Rabbah is that we make gzera, make one gzera onto the other. So why don't we make a gzera on the vlad, the secondary toma, just like you cannot taivel the higher level tama? Answers the Gemara. Again, the same type of answer that's an abnormal case, but the Gemara explains why. Vlad toma. So what is the case of vlad toma? Kohanim's reason, it's an abnormal case to have such a case by Kohanim. Why? Because Kohanim eat truma. Therefore, Kohanim have to be careful with their status of Toma. They have to make sure their body's always tahar. Kohanim's reason, and therefore, you don't have to be worried about such a case because it's not such a common case. Tashema, the final 5th attempt of Abayi asking on Rabba who said, Gzeir, we make secondary decrees. Tashema. The Amar Rav Chia Barashi Amar Rav. Nida she'ina lo begadim, a woman who's a nida that has no clothing. So what is she allowed to do? Ma'aremes, she's allowed to do a trickery. V'toiveles, when she goes to the mikvah, bivigadeh, she could go while she's wearing her clothing. Why? Because then she'll become tar, and her clothing will become tar. Of course, you have to, this is one of the sources, you have to be careful with chatzitzas. Of course, it's going to be loose clothing, etc. The water doesn't be able to go in. But what do we see? We don't make a gezerah, we don't make a secondary decree. V'misa, basically we just said, nigzar. We should, yes, make a decree in this case. We should be worried you might come to dump the clothing into the mikvah by itself. Answers the Gemara, Shani Hasam. The case is different. Allah. It's an abnormal, again, it's a weird case to put something into the mikvah by wearing it. Therefore she'll remember. 5 questions on Rabbah, 5 answers by Rabbah. Rabbah's answer of that we do make a secondary decree stands the test of time. Answer number 1, why in the Mishnah you're not allowed to put the kelim, the utensils, into the mikvah on Shabbos, into the mikvah on Yontif. Gezerah, you might come to carry dalams, it's just Rabbim. Gezerah of Yontif, atu Shabbos. Teretz number 2, an explanation of the Mishnah, says the Gemara, Rav Yosef Amar. Rav Yosef, the second explanation, about 13 lines to the bottom. First word in line is Zechayri. Rav Yosef Amar comes in Rav Yosef and he says, a different reason, Gezerah misham schita. You know why you can't table something? The reason is because we're afraid that you're going to come to squeeze it out, and therefore we don't let you table anything on Yantif. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye asked the obvious question. Teinach, fine, I understand what you're talking about. Kelim d'bnei schitinu. If you're talking about something, a shirt, a towel, something that you could wring out, I understand why you can't put that into the mikvah. Kelim d'bnei schitinu, Michael Meimar. But to put a cup into the mikvah, you can't wring out a cup. So what's the problem? Amar le answers the Gemara, Gezerah ani honey, gezerah ligezerah. The primary reason we make the decree is because of things that you could squeeze out. But because of that, we don't let you put anything in the mikvah. So now Abaye is basically giving, Rav Yosef is basically giving the same teretz as Rabbah. A different concern, but the same thing that we make secondary decrees. So Eisvei kolani tiyof. Thus we asked all the aforementioned questions, those 5 questions we asked on Rabbah. V'shani leikin shanin and Rav Yosef answered just like Rabbah answered. Therefore, that's a second teretz how Rav Yosef learns up the Mishnah. And the third way of learning up why you're not allowed to table something in the Mishnah, Rav Bibi Amar, Gezerah Shamayisha. You know the reason is because we're afraid that you might come to wait to table it on Yantif. We were concerned that you're going to wait and say, I'll have more time on Yantif. And it's a zilzal in Yantif to do that. Number 1. And number 2 is it might become tummy in the interim. Therefore, we don't allow you to table it on Yantif. So 3 explanations of why you cannot table something in Shabbos in Yantif. Either Gezerah, you might come walking Dalet Amos, it's just Rabbin, or Gezerah, you might come to squeeze it out, or Gezerah, you're going to wait till Yantif and thereby the increased tum of the item will become impure. Says the Gemara, Tani Kavaz de Rabibi, we have a riot to the third explanation, Rabibi, Kli Sheneto Me'erev Yantif, Ein matbin unless have yantif. If the utensil became tummy and Erev yantif, this should sound familiar. You're not allowed to type it on yantif. Gezerah, why? Shema Yashe. You might come to wait till Yantiv. Exactly what Rabbi said. Rava Omar, a fourth explanation into learning the Mishnah why you're not allowed to type things in Yantiv and Shabbos, says Rava. Perhaps the most obvious Teretz one would have thought about it, because it looks like you're fixing something. You have an item which was not usable, and you're making it usable to the level of tikkun, kli, a level of fixing the item. Ihachi asked the Gemara, Adam Nami, a person also should not be allowed to go to the mikvah on Shabbos. Why? Because he's fixing himself, he's becoming tahar. Answers the Gemara, Adam nira kemekar. No, he looks like he's just cooling off. He's going to jump into the water. He's hot and sweaty. Just going into the water to cool off. Says the Gemara, okay. Oh, tinach mayim yaf. And I understand if you're going to jump into clean water, swimming pool water, it looks like you're cooling off. But mayim roy Michael if you're going to jump into a stinky pool of water, what's the only reason someone would jump into such an ichi pool is because he's tummy and he has to be tar. So therefore, says the Gemara, it doesn't look like he's cooling off. Amar Rav Yenachem Bar Yitzchak, no. Pa'amim shadim ba. There are times that a person comes from the field, bishrav, and it's a boiling hot day, turning over to yurchesa mebeis v'roichetza afilu b'mei mishra, and you'll jump into even the ichi water, the soaking flax water, because you're so hot and disgusting. So at any time you jump into water, it might be you're just coming to cool off. So we're not afraid that it's near it, that it looks like you're fixing yourself, because you might just be cooling off. Says the Gemara, okay. Teinach, I understand b'moisachama. In the summer, you're right, you're hot, it's stinky, it's sweaty. You'll do whatever you can to jump into water. But b'mais like shavim in the winter, Michael Ameimahar, in the winter it makes no sense. Amar Nachbar Yislik, 3 lines to the top. Even in the winter, you come home from the field. Why is say all over you? I'm not sure. But you're filled with tit and tsaya, excrement and feces and all other nastiness is all over you, and therefore and you need to bathe yourself. And therefore, you're going to jump into this disgusting water just to clean yourself off. So again, a person jumping into water does not look like he's fixing himself, because he might just be cleaning himself off. Says the Gemara, Teinach b'Shabbos, b'Yom Kippurim, Michael Ameimar, just at Yom Kippur. So on Shabbos, I understand, you're right. But what about in Yom Kippur? On Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to bathe yourself. So if someone is jumping into the water, it can't look like he's cooling off. It can't look like he's just bathing himself, because that is forbidden. Amar Rabba, Amar Rava. So Rava says, 1 second. Mika midi de Shabbos shari Yom Kippur aser. Is there something that's mutter on Shabbos and aser on Yom Kippur? No way. Elohoyel v'Shabbos shari, once it's mutter on Shabbos, b'Yom Kippurim nami shari. We do not say that something is more aser on Yom Kippur than on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, 1 second. What was this answer of Rava? This answer of Rava was Hayil. Since we say one thing, we say something else. A concept that we've seen many times. Hayil, that on one thing it's mutter here. Since it's mutter on Shabbos, it's mutter on Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Does Rava subscribe to this concept in the first place? This concept of a Hayil, the concept that causes it's mutter on Shabbos, it's going to be mutter on Yom Kippur. Umiyas Rava. Hayil, v'tanam, we learn to the Mishnah. His teeth are hurting him. You're not allowed to gargle with vinegar. You're allowed to dip into the vinegar and eat it. Nisrap, and if the little bit of vinegar on the food helps your toothache, nisrap, and no problem. That is one Beitzah. Says the Gemara, V'ramina Allah. Again, we're in the middle of proving that Rava doesn't hold to the concept of Hayil. So how are we proving it? So Mishnah number 1 says, person cannot gargle with vinegar when he has a toothache. What can he do? Eat his food dipped in vinegar, and if that vinegar is enough, then great. And we asked in that Mishnah from another Mishnah. You can't gargle and spit out the vinegar. But what could you do? You could sip the vinegar and swallow it, because that's sometimes a normal process. So we have a steer over here. What's going on? Are you allowed to sip vinegar? You're not allowed to sip vinegar. In the first price it said, no sipping vinegar. You could dip and eat. The second price it said you could dip and swallow. So what's going on? Abaye explained. Our Mishnah, when did it say that you could sip the vinegar? it says that when you sip it and you spit it out, but if you swallow it, then the Mishnah agrees that it's allowed. That's Abaye's answer. So Abaye hones in on the second Beitzah, that swallowing is allowed. Says Rava, no. Really, when the Mishnah says it's ulcer, it's even sipping and swallowing. One is before the meal. When it's before the meal, then it's allowed because that's a normal process. When it's after the meal, then it's not a normal process to sip the vinegar. That's Rava's answer, Abaye's answer, how to answer up this contradiction, whether you're allowed to sip vinegar when you have a toothache. Is there a problem of refu of healing yourself on Shabbos? After that bit of a lengthy discussion, now the Gemara hones in on the issue of Rava. V'imisa, based on what you just said, name hayil v'kodim tibul shari lacher tibul nami shari. If Rava subscribes this rule of hayil, this concept that teaches us if A is mutter, then B is mutter. If this allowed, says the Gemara, I don't understand. So if Rav will allow you to do it before the meal, he should also allow you to do it after the meal. Says the Gemara, you're right. Hadr be Rava me'ahi. Rava went back. Rava who's chayzer on the way he explained the Beitzah about the sipping the vinegar, and he really holds of Abaye. Therefore, there's no question. Rava holds of hayil, no problem. I asked the Gemara this basic question: how do you know? Whenever we have a question, how do you know which one he was chayzer on? Looks like a deitach. There's no question. The Tani went to the Beitzah explicitly. It's an explicit Beitzah that says you're allowed to be Tayvel in Yom Kippur. And therefore Rava was forced to say, Hoyel, it's Mutter on Shabbos, it's Mutter in Yom Kippur, because that's an explicit Beitzah. And the other Beitzah that said, Hoyel, that we weren't sure, that Beitzah of sipping the vinegar, that one has to change. That Rava is going to explain like a Bayo. Says the Gemara to that's about 15 lines to the bottom. The Shavin, and everyone agreed in the Mishnah, again, we have our cup of stone cup. Water inside the cup is tamei, and you want to make the water tar. So what do? Is you put the cup into the mikvah just enough that the tar water of the mikvah touches the tar water on the cup, and that makes the water tar. But you're not allowed to tayvel it normally. Says the Gemara, what does that mean you can't tayvel it? Amar Shmuel, ein matvilin es akli al gav neimav letaroi bihantif. You're not allowed to be tayvel the utensil, a utensil that's tamei, because al gav neimav, because of the water, in order to make it tar on yantif. So again, if the water is tamei and the utensil is tamei, you can't go dip the whole utensil in order so the utensil becomes tar on yantif. Says the Gemara, Mani Masnizan, who is the beginning of our Mishnah? Like Rabbi V'Larabana, the Tani learns in a Bryce. Ein Makbilin as Akli Agam Mima Letaroi. Vein Masikin as Amayim Akli Avin Letar and Divi Rabbi. So Rabbi allows nothing. You can't be tayvel of the utensil, nor are you allowed to do this hasaka, nor are you allowed to make the waters contiguous and touch each other. So Rabbi is not our Mishnah, because our Mishnah allowed you to make the waters contiguous. The Chachamim Ayimrim, no. Makbilin Akli Agam Mima Letaroi. Oh, Mashikin as Amayim Akli Avin Letaroi. The Chachamim said they're both mutter. So our Mishnah took sides. Our Mishnah said you're allowed to do hashaka. You're allowed to let the waters kiss each other to make the water tar. But you're not allowed to tayvel the kli. So it's not Rebbe, it's not the Chachamim. Rebbe says everything is also. The Chachamim said everything is matter. Says the Gemara Mani. Rebbe kasha hashaki, Rabbani kasha atvala. Answers the Gemara. Iba yisema Rebbe, Iba yisema Rabbanan. We could say it's either one. Iba yisema Rebbe. Reish the Beitzah biyantiv v'seva b'Shabbos. V'kulam asnisan biyantiv. That's one way of learning. V'Iba yisema on the top of Yutesa Manal. V'Iba yisema Rabbanan. Basically, it depends which one is Shabbos and which one is Yontif. I'll be able to figure it out that it can be either opinion of Rabbi or the opinion of Rabbanan. There's no